All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. Now, just like it was for Jim Harbaugh during his first season as the head coach of the San Francisco 49ers back in 2011, he now has the Los Angeles Chargers thinking about the playoffs in year number one there. After last night, or last Thursday rather, when we saw the Chargers defeat the Denver Broncos, they improved their record on the season to 9-6, and in the process, they really strengthened their chances of making the playoffs. The Chargers and Broncos are both now 9-6, and of course, Denver loses the tiebreaker to LA due to the fact that the Chargers swept the Broncos this season. And you look at it, the Chargers are right there at 9-6, the Broncos are right there at 9-6, but then it's slim pickings for the Bengals, Colts, and Dolphins. All of them are 7-8, and they need to win out, and they need a lot of help. But from this point on, all LA has to do is win one out of their last two games, and this team is heading back to the postseason. You think about it for Jim Harbaugh, just like it was when he took over in San Francisco. He inherited a solid team here with the Chargers, but unfortunately, they are known for underachieving more than anything else. Okay, got a lot of talent there, and then we saw the playoff meltdown from the Lightning Bolts a couple of years ago in the wild card round against Jacksonville. It carried over to last season, and of course, ultimately, it cost head coach Brandon Staley his job. But there's a difference to me, in my opinion, with this Chargers team this season. I'm looking at LA, and they're playing with more toughness. And in the process, they're winning games that they would normally lose. Granted, don't get me wrong, they've lost some close ones as well. You're not going to win them all. But nonetheless, I think back to what we just saw last Thursday in the win over the Broncos. Everything was set up for quote unquote another Chargers meltdown, or saying the Chargers are just being the Chargers. They were 8-4. They lost that heartbreaker to Kansas City back in Week 14. It carried over to Week 15, where we saw them get destroyed, especially in the second half on their own home field, courtesy of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But nonetheless, they came back and found the resolve to win that game last Thursday against the Broncos. And it's just one of those things where just winning that one game alone really not only changed the complexion of the playoffs for the Chargers, but it also changed the complexion for a lot of those teams on the outside looking in. Why? Because if the Chargers are 8-7 now, as opposed to 9-6, we're having a very different conversation as far as the teams that are right behind them to make the playoffs. But at the end of the day, this team is playing with more toughness, and they're playing with more resolve. And like I said, they're finding ways to win some games that they in the past would have normally lost. Now, statistically, Chargers quarterback Justin Herbert has had better seasons. But in my opinion, this is one of, if not his best season so far in the NFL. The biggest thing for me with Justin Herbert is taking care of the football. He only has 3 interceptions on this season so far. And I know that 2 of those have come in the last 2 games for the Chargers. He only threw 7 last year, but he only played in 13 games for LA. But nonetheless, I feel like Justin Herbert has really accepted the Harbaugh challenge. And the reason why I say that, we know this. Jim Harbaugh is tough on his quarterbacks, but he's tough on them to get the most out of them. And of course, if you're a quarterback, it's very hard to go out there and argue with Jim Harbaugh because, he played quarterback in the NFL for a very long time, and he did have success at the position. And on top of that, he's a teacher at the position as well. And I think he took this job knowing that, he had a diamond in the rough, if you will, with Justin Herbert, and he felt like he was a guy whom he could get something out of. And I feel like, again, Justin Herbert is not having the biggest statistical season of his career, but the biggest statistic for a quarterback are their wins and losses. And right now, he's 9-6 so far on this season. And getting back to that Chargers resolve that they have found this season. We saw them go down 21-10 at home last Thursday night to Denver. And in years past, the Chargers would not have come back and won that game. And again, I think that is a real credit to Harbaugh. At the end of the day, it's just like his teams at Stanford, just like his teams previous to that at the University of San Diego, when he went to the 49ers, when he went to Michigan. There's nothing flashy about these Chargers. They're simply gritty, they're hardworking, and they go out there and they take care of their business each and every week. And at the end of the day, a guy like Harbaugh, you know it, he believes in hard work. You ain't going to outwork him, and you're not going to outwork his team. You may be better than him. Okay, on paper, you may be better than him athletically as far as his teams go, but at the end of the day, you are simply not going to outwork them. So, with that said, the Chargers have 2 games left, and I really do believe that this team is going to the postseason. They've got 2 more games, both on the road. They take on the New England Patriots this Saturday in Foxborough, and then they finish up in Vegas with the Raiders. And of course, we remember how that game went down a couple of years ago. Basically, it was a play-in game for for the Chargers when they went to Vegas to take on the Raiders, and of course, the Raiders won that game. But nonetheless, it's one of those where the Chargers are going to be favored in both of those games. They cannot look past the Patriots. They cannot look past the Raiders either. The Patriots have been playing better coming down the stretch. I think they're starting to see something with their young quarterback Drake May, and they want to try to have some carryover into the offseason as they look to build upon their program. And for Antonio Pierce with the Raiders, you can see that they have not given up as well. Again, the Chargers are favored on Saturday against the Patriots. They will be favored against the Raiders to finish the regular season, but nonetheless, they've got to win at least one of those games to secure their postseason spot. But nonetheless, you look at it and there's still seeding that's up in the air. Clearly, we know the Chargers ain't winning the West. That goes to Kansas City once again, but maybe just maybe, depending on how things work out with both the Baltimore Ravens and the Pittsburgh Steelers, maybe the Chargers could leapfrog them for the top wild card spot in the AFC. We got to wait and see. A lot of things are still up in the air as far as seeding goes in the American Conference. And that's going to be very important because you look at the way that the Chargers have stacked up and do stack up against the teams on the AFC side of the playoff ledger that are going to be in the postseason. You think about it as of right now, the Chargers' record this season against playoff teams in the AFC is 2-4. Of course, both of their wins coming against Denver, but then they were swept in against Kansas City. 2 very close games that the Chargers just simply could not find a way to get over the hump against a very good Chiefs team. Going back to earlier this season, they suffered their first loss of the season back in week 3 on the road against the Pittsburgh Steelers. And then, of course, Jim Harbaugh welcomed his brother John Harbaugh and the Baltimore Ravens to town last month. And of course, the Ravens got the best of the Chargers as this Chargers defense could simply not slow down the Ravens ground game. So that's the litmus test, if you will, as far as what the Chargers are going to be up against heading into the playoffs. You look at teams that play very good defense. Kansas City has a good defense. The same thing can be said about Pittsburgh as well. And then you have to deal with the Houston Texans and possibly the Buffalo Bills. So it's one of those where if you're the Chargers, you're going to be on the road, and more than likely you're going to be in a cold weather environment. And for the Chargers to go out there and make a run next month, that's what they are up against. I know that we saw Jim Harbaugh in his first 3 years in San Francisco get the 49ers at least to the NFC Championship game. I'm not saying that it cannot be done with the Chargers, but they're going to have their work cut out for them because you think about the teams that they're going to have to go through. Kansas City continues to be Kansas City. It hasn't been pretty, but they just simply know how to win those close games. You got to deal with Buffalo more than likely in Western New York come January. Maybe a trip to Pittsburgh, maybe a trip to Baltimore. You have to possibly deal with the Houston Texans on the road. This is what the Chargers are going to be up against, but still, there is improvement this year in year number 1 for Los Angeles under Jim Harbaugh to get to this point. Now the next step is going to be advancing in the postseason. Getting to the playoffs is one thing, but what are you going to do to advance, win a game, get to the next round, and keep that momentum going? We got to wait and see. But nonetheless, you've got a big quarterback in Justin Herbert that I think Harbaugh is trying to, unmask, more of that potential. You have a defense with that could put the pressure on guys. You got the likes of Joey Bosa over there. You got Khalil Mack. You got Bud Dupree. So they can bring the pressure. So and Harbaugh's going to have his team ready. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's just a matter of them executing. But nonetheless, I was one of those people that said I expected the Chargers to be very improved in year number one under Jim Harbaugh. And here we are because, again, one more win in one of their last two games, and this team is postseason bound. Jim Harbaugh knows how to coach. Okay. It's unfortunate that it didn't finish the way that he wanted to in San Francisco. There was a power struggle between Harbaugh and now former Niners general manager Trent Baalke. Didn't work out there. Went back to his alma mater. Showed that he could still get it done at a high level, and of course led Michigan to the national championship last season, and of course coming back to the National Football League this time around. There are some guys that simply were born to wear a whistle. That's Jim Harbaugh. There are some guys that were born to be teachers and leaders. Jim Harbaugh fits those categories as well. He's turned things around for the Chargers. He's got them believing about postseason. They will get to the postseason. And let's see when the Chargers get to the postseason, what type of impact that they'll be able to make. But, folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank each and every one of you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. I want to take this time out to thank all of you fine folks out there for tuning in. And if you have not already, please feel free to subscribe to this channel. Now, if you're on the X, formerly known as Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it will be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. Now you can check it out. Drop a line and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. Also, please feel free to stay tuned to this channel throughout this week and the early parts of next week. Got plenty to talk about as far as the college football playoff, week 17 of the NFL season, and of course, carrying over into week number 18, the final regular season of the weekend of the regular season in the NFL with the playoffs right around the corner. But nonetheless, fine folks, my name is William Martin. I am signing off and I'm saying take care. And thanks once again for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. Be well, everybody.